Okay, so I just wanted to show a quick example of how to use the mirror modifier for some of the intermediate students. So if we go to the modifier menu here and we open up the drop-down, we can go down here and see the mirror option. And what this does is it creates a mirrored instance of your geometry. And so you can see here it has some attributes that you can enable or disable. The first one is the axis that it's being mirrored on. So let's just take a look at this. So right now we can't see anything really happening. And part of that is because it actually mirrors around the center point. So moving the object just mirrors another object in the exact same place around that center point. So what we can do is modify the location of the center point. And if we go up here to options and click on origins, which is another kind of name for a center point here, we can move this over, and that should allow us to mirror this object. It's mirroring in the x-axis right now, so you won't see anything happen unless you move it on the x-axis. In the y-axis, you can see that start to happen here when you move this in the y-axis and enable y mirroring. So it's actually being mirrored on the x and the y. So if I was to move this, you can see it's actually mirroring it twice, which is creating 4 objects. So we don't want to do that if we're just trying to mirror something from left to right. So I'm going to disable y-axis mirroring, and I'm going to just go to undo and put this origin back in the middle. Okay, so instead of using the origin point for the object, which means you have to actually modify the object itself, because that origin is a part of the object's data, and that can have implications. I'll just turn it on really fast to show you what they are. If I wanted to scale this object, I have to disable active origin to be able to show you that. So we're in kind of regular object mode, and I've moved the origin out here. If I was to scale the object, you can see that it's actually scaling with respect to that new origin. And you could see how this would be a problem if you just want to scale this in place. So again, I'm going to undo that, put that back in the middle. And what we can do is maybe just move this object here for now. And you can see that it's mirroring in the X. So let's just enable Y-axis mirroring. And let's go ahead and add another object to the scene. We're going to add an empty. I'm on the object menu, go to add, go to empty, and it doesn't matter. I mean, it could be another polygonal object that you hide. It doesn't matter what it is, but for now, we're just going to use the empty. And essentially, we're going to use this as the origin. So let's go back to this object's modifiers and go to the mirror. And we're going to use the eyedropper to pick, no, it actually picked the light. Let's just click on the drop down and click the empty. I think the light was in the same spot. Okay, so now what you can see is that our object, our empty, is the origin point and it's in the middle. So now it's telling this object, instead of mirroring around itself and its origin point here, mirror around the origin point here, and it now puts that object over there. So now when we move the object, it mirrors appropriately. If you want this object to seamlessly kind of merge with this one, what we can do is go to face mode and edit mode here. And we're going to just press X and delete that face. Okay, and what you'll see is that we've created a hole. And if we turn our snapping on and do incremental, this should allow us to snap to the grid point. And I think, you know, this object is maybe a little bit larger. I think I perhaps scaled it earlier. Let's open that up and see. It doesn't look like it's scaled because it's 111 here. So it's just not perfectly sized for what we need. So what we can do is turn on vertex mode, and we're going to keep yeah, let's go ahead and just select press 1 here in the keyboard to go to vertex mode. We're going to select that one. Let's just see if I can constrain this. Okay, so snapping to vertex, it doesn't have a vertex to snap to. I was hoping maybe it could snap to the mirrored one when it moves close to it, but that's not really working how I thought it would work. So let's just go back to increment, do absolute grid snap, and we're going to go ahead and move this origin point temporarily to this this vertex here. So I'm going to go to origins. We're going to go to vertex snap, and if I just press G on the keyboard and I hover over that vertex, that's going to enable us to put our handles now on that vertex. Let's disable origins. And so why am I doing this? So I'm doing this so that I can essentially put a move handle at the very edge of this object so I can snap it to the grid. So now when I do incremental snap, absolute grid snap, you'll see it's actually snapping to each grid line. If I go into top view here, you can see here, oops, you can see here, it's snapping to each grid point. And so what that means is I can just snap it to this middle grid point. Okay, so now when I modify one side, right, I still have absolute grid snapping turned on. I'll go ahead and turn that off. You can see that now I can actually model one side and the other side does the same thing. So if I was to just, let's turn on X-ray here. And so if I wanted to make something, let's say a hanger, right, I could do something like that. And so I'm just going to add some edge loops. I don't really know what a hanger looks like off the top of my head. Something like that, I guess. It's close. Right, and now I can, let's scale this in the X axis. You can see that it's scaling it properly though. It's going to that original origin point. The easy way to get that back into the middle of your geometry is to just go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. Geometry to Origin would move the geometry to where the origin is. Instead, we want to take that origin and move it back to the middle of the geometry, right? So now it's over here. All right, so now when we scale this in the X, it's going to scale from the middle. Something like that. Scale that in, and I can add some edge loops. I can use this. I just did Command R or Control R to add this edge loop mode, and then I can use the scroll wheel on my mouse to scroll up. I can move it, or I can press Escape and hit the S key, and now it's going to scale. But to constrain that to the X axis, I can press X, and now I can scale in the X axis, right? And now that I've added those edges, which will be holding edges, I can go ahead and add my subdivision surface, right? Obviously, it doesn't look great, so let's add a couple more holding edges here, something like that. Put one over here. Like that. And I actually want this one to be more square, call it the shoulder, something like that. And this is maybe too curved, so let's put an edge there. Okay, and that's it. I'm at least starting to describe that shape a bit more realistically. So I can right click and do shade smooth and kind of get a more realistic object that way. So there you go. That's how you use the mirror modifier and add some holding edges.